Thank you. Okay, so I just want to start off by thanking you all for being here. Without you guys in these seats, this would be a really awkward event, so thanks for coming. I would also like to thank our sponsors. Without you guys, we wouldn't have been able to get this event off the ground and running so quickly as we did, and I'm very happy about that. So a little bit about the we behind this operation. My name is Caroline Lamarine. I'm a senior here at PC. I'm a global studies major with a concentration in immigration law and reform. I grew up in a wonderfully diverse town, very large community. Although it was a town, it was basically city in size. And while I hold a lot of love for my town and where I was raised, it was evident to me at a young age that the state government did not. Only 5 minutes down the road was a town aptly named Sturbridge as compared to my Southbridge. And although it bore the same resemblance as my town, it was evident that we were not treated the same from the state government. Whereas I had a continuing housing crisis with people living on top of each other in triple deckers, we had a school system overtaken by the state, and don't even get me started on the quality of our roads. However, in Sturbridge, they had a lovely school system, lovely roads, and McMansions on every corner. So growing up, I couldn't really understand this, so when I came here to PC, it was my mission to do so. I wanted to use my privilege and my positionality as a white woman with the means to attend a financial institution to give back to the community that raised me and got to where I am today. So that's a little bit about me. Thankfully, my advisor, Cebulko, was so willing to help me continue what I was doing over the summer at my internship at Green & Spiegel downtown in Providence. I worked to help clients get their visas, and it was really a rewarding process, and I knew that's what I wanted to go into. So Kara wanted to help me find ways to foster those skills that I was learning, and here is what we landed on. So Kara is a Soc professor here at PC, and she does a lot of research behind the scenes, and her passion for immigration is truly evident in all of her classes that she's taken. I've taken a few so far, and I love every single one of them. They're my favorite classes. But I'm super excited to be doing this. So enough about the we. Now for what you guys are all here for is our panelists. Here with us today we have Pedro. He graduated from PC in 2017 with degrees in both political science and sociology. And today he works as a policy advocate for Catholic Legal Immigration Network. Christina graduated from PC in 2021, again, a double degree in both global studies in sociology, and today she works as program associate for the Detained Youth Empowerment Program. Jose graduated from PC in 2021 as well, with degrees in both global studies and political science, and today he now works as advancement manager for Rion Immigrant Center. Vania graduated from PC in 2017 with a bachelor's degree in global studies, and she now serves as immigrant youth organizer for the mayor's office in Boston. Susie graduated from PC in 2017 with degrees in both global studies and sociology, and now works as a paralegal at Barry, Aleman, and Leiden. Okay, that's it for me.
I just want to start by thanking one other person. Caroline did such a great job thanking the two of us, but the other thing is Catherine Lidge, where are you? Back there, like sometimes your staff folks who do all of the behind the scenes work don't get the recognition, but none of this was possible without Catherine too. So if we could give a big round of applause for Catherine. This is being recorded, everything, the pamphlets that you see, Caroline worked on those pamphlets, Catherine helped get them printed, right? So if you don't have a pamphlet, there are some going around. I think we only printed 50, maybe, I'm not sure. So we don't have them for everyone, but we do have some. So the next thing I just want to say, it's really, really, really special. So all of you are students. I haven't had all of you in my class. If you are in my class right now, I would take notes. It's kind of a smart thing to do if you are in my class. But I haven't had all of you. But one of the things is like sometimes when you're at PC, like you forget like how much of an impact you have on your professors as much as we might have an impact on you. And it's been really, really cool to stay connected to you once you graduate. And Caroline and I were talking about this event as a potential, and at the same time, Pedro, who graduated in 2017 was texting me. And he's like, hey, you need to do this. And I'm like, okay, I'll do this. And then he goes to Tijuana and he sends me a picture. He's like, look where I am, right? And so you have these relationships with students, and it came out of that conversation with Pedro. I was like, oh, there's a lot of things happening, and there's this thing happening in November called an election. And immigration, if you haven't been paying attention, is kind of at the forefront of that election conversation. And then at the same time, Caroline and I were talking about there are so many students at PC who think about working with immigrant populations, but the only thing they can think about is I can be an immigration lawyer, and that's all they know. And so we started thinking about, I know lots of students who are working with immigrant communities, but not just as lawyers. They're doing it in a lot of different capacities. And so we wanted to invite them today. So this panel has two goals for all of you. The first goal is to think about what is the other type of career pathways I could have that might take advantage of my PC degree that work with immigrant populations. Maybe it's in the legal profession, maybe it's not. And then the other point of this goal is to have a conversation about what it means to work with immigrant communities when there's an election going on. Like, how do the stakes feel higher, and how does it impact the kind of work that they do and the communities they work with? So those are the two goals, and I'm gonna start off very broadly, but we're gonna use this, I'm a moderator, but I'm hoping to make it more like town hall. So I'm gonna come around. So if you have questions, use your pen and paper, put it down, but the more you hear from each other, I think the better this event is going to be. Does that make sense? So hopefully that this is an interactive dialogue. What I've asked, and I'm gonna ask each panelist to do, is to take about 2 or 3 minutes, and I want them to answer 2 questions for you. And the first question is to tell you a little bit. You saw their fancy titles. What does that mean? What do they do? So they're gonna give you like their elevator pitch about what they do. And then the second thing is why, when I reached out to them, did they decide to fly from Los Angeles, fly from Washington, D.C., and drive down from Boston on a rainy night to come talk to all of you? So they're gonna talk about why it is that they agreed to come, and I'm gonna turn it over to them. Do you have a preference which direction you wanna go? Christina, we'll start with you down there. She's looking at me, shoot. Okay, I'm gonna start with Christina, and they're each gonna talk, and then we'll go from there.
All right. Can everyone hear me? Okay. My name is Christina Roca. Like mentioned, I graduated from PC in 2021, so 3 years ago. It seems really crazy, just because everything happened so quickly after graduating. And I think I took an unconventional route after graduating, since we graduated during COVID in 2021. And at the time, I was like, my goal is just to get a job post-PC. So I became a second grade teacher. Love kids, love working with them, but I knew that I needed to be outside of the classroom. I needed to be doing more, and more in the migrant advocacy field. So I spent 6 months in Tijuana, Mexico, after being inspired by the border crossings class that I took twice with Kara in my time at PC. And then I recently started a new job in Orange County in Santa Ana for the Immigrant Defenders Law Center, and I'm a program associate. My role, I do a lot of things, but I'm very lucky to have such a supportive team. We have 4 offices, one in LA, one in Riverside, my office in Santa Ana, and another in San Diego. And what our team does is we meet with unaccompanied minors, so minors that come to this country without parents and are detained and are in detention centers. And I go to these shelters every single week. I'm one of the first adults that they see. I come in contact with them, and I'm pretty much a person that I tell them what their rights are in this country. I tell them they have to go to immigration court since they got an NTA, a notice to appear. I tell them that I'm gonna do everything in my power to try to help them find a lawyer, whether they're reunifying in Los Angeles or in New York. And unfortunately, a lot of the times, there's so many traumatic things that happen to them along the journey. One of my most important roles that I take seriously to heart is making sure that I find the appropriate resources to provide them with, and that includes myself. I'm also undergoing a lot of training for trauma-informed, so making sure that I'm also being someone that provides them really good advice, and making sure that I'm not re-traumatizing them because of the journey that they've undergone. So that's a little short pitch of what I do. It's a lot, but I find it really satisfying to at least be on the ground and know that I'm able to take some steps and help someone at the individual level. And the reason why I came back, I'm on 2 hours of sleep right now after taking a red eye. I think it's just really important to talk about the work that we do. After PC, I had no idea how I wanted to get involved with the immigration realm and helping migrants, and it took me a long time to figure out how I was gonna do it, and after trial and error, I finally landed a job that I really love. So I'm very excited to speak more about that with you all today.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jose Maza. I am also a member of the graduating class of 2021. Here at PC, I majored in global studies and political science. It's good to be here today. I appreciate you guys having me. So similar to Christina, with my 2 degrees right immediately after graduation, in the midst of the COVID pandemic, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. During my time here at PC, I had a lot of friends that were business majors, and their job search and their experience post-college was very different than mine. It almost felt like they all had something lined up, and I was a little bit lost, and I didn't really know where to start. So after college, I moved to where I'm originally from, Dallas, Texas. I moved back home, and I worked for a financial services firm for about a year. That was a good experience. It taught me a lot about personal finance and you know, kind of how to live as an adult post-grad. But it also quickly taught me that that was not the route in which I wanted to take my career. That was not really what I had majored in at PC and focused a lot of my time and effort in doing. So while it was a good experience, I always knew that I wanted to get back into something a little bit more related to what I'd studied here at PC, and a lot of my focus was work in different courses in immigration and things of that nature, so I always wanted to find my way back. I didn't really know how to do it, but like Christina said, after trial and error, I landed a job at the Rion Immigrant Center, which is where I am now in Boston. So the Rion Immigrant Center, we're a nonprofit that works in supporting recent arrival immigrants all across the greater Boston area. And the work that we do, you know, we work in conjunction with other nonprofits, city, state government, and I have been really lucky to work there since July of 2022. When I first started there, I started as a program manager for a pilot legal program that we were doing in conjunction with 15 other nonprofits in the Boston area. I held that position for about 2 years, and then I transitioned over into my current role now, which is advancement manager. So what that role entitles is I work in our development office, which is the fundraising office for our nonprofit. Since we are a nonprofit, most of our money depends on us bringing in money, whether it's through grants, donations, things of that nature. So the day-to-day of my work is meeting with different, you know, players that might be able to provide us with some money. So whether that's a very wealthy donor, whether that's an individual, a corporation, or different sources of grant funding. We do a lot of the back-end research of that, and then we have another member in our staff who's great that does a lot of our grant applications. So a lot of it is kind of figuring out ways and different companies that might be aligned with our ideals and what we do and might be willing to provide us with a source of funding. I'm happy to expand more about that, but I appreciate being here today. Thank you.
There we go. Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try that again. Good evening, everyone. Thank you. My name is Vania, Pereira. I use the she, her series pronoun. I am coming from the mayor's office for immigrant advancement in Boston. So can I get a show of hand who's from Boston? Oh, okay. So you all know who your mayor is, or at least you should. Mayor Michelle Wu. So I have the privilege of sitting in the mayor's office for immigrant advancement as the immigrant youth organizer. And what that means is I do all things youth immigration related. So if there's any opportunities within Boston that is funded by tax dollars, immigrant youth needs to have equal access to those, as well as those that are not immigrants, such as US citizens. So one of the programs that I oversee is the Immigrant Youth Advancement Program, which was formerly known as the Dreamers Fellow. And that came after some folks identify as dreamers from the DREAM Act. However, we have shifted from that term because some folks no longer identify as dreamers, and the term dreamers to some may be problematic. So what that program does is it provides a learn and earn pathway for immigrant youth, regardless of their immigration status. So what I do is I sit on a pile of money and I provide grants to nonprofit organizations that are immigrant youth serving. So for example, this summer, I was able to grant about $1 million to 23 different nonprofits across the city of Boston, and we were able to serve 336 youth for work experience opportunities during the summer. So that is a bulk of the program that I run, on top of gathering information, going to community events, and advising my office as well as the mayor on opportunities and resources for immigrant youth. Why am I here today? Well, I took Kara's class, global studies major, a business major. I actually see 3 of my professors here. I'm not gonna point them out. And I think folks like Kara and folks like Nick made, I'm not gonna point the other person out, but them two made PC a safe space for me, because it was a place in space that was not meant for somebody that looked like me and came from my background. And so I owe them a lot of that safety net, which then means if they were to call on me to come, whether speaking to a panel, a class, or just say, Vania, I need you for research, I'm all in. I was also free. So that's why I'm here. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Pedro Aleman Perfecto. I was a political science and sociology double major with a Black Studies minor. And I am based out of the DC area. It's a place called Silver Spring, Maryland. So it's a DC suburb. And I work at Catholic Legal Immigration Network. It's a national nonprofit organization that you can say oversees or has a network of roughly 450 organizations. And that offers a lot of technical and training assistance to a lot of nonprofits across the country. But my team oversees the federal advocacy component of that part of it. In that form of it, we do a lot of administrative advocacy. And what does that mean is we try to advocate as much as possible in the executive branch of government. As you're all aware, hopefully you all are, if you're political science or your civics component, there's 3 branches of government. We do the executive branch or the presidency. So we try as much as possible to advocate in that branch to better immigration policies at the federal government, to try to advocate and implement those policies following some series of, you can say, Administrative Procedures Act, which is a specific form of law in place that can better benefit other types of immigration law. So I have various portfolios that I oversee, and I meet with a lot of stakeholders and a lot of government officials throughout, weeks, months, to try to, as I mentioned, better policies at the border with individuals that are here in the United States or who are trying to enter the United States. So we try as much as possible to do that. And I've been doing that for the past 1.5 years now. But before that, I used to do legal representation in San Diego. I'm originally from San Diego, California. So I did that for almost 4 years, where I represented clients in immigration court. I'm not an attorney myself, but you're allowed to do that in immigration law. So why I decided to come is, as other people have mentioned, I've taken Kara's border global crossing class. I'm also from the border, so that personal experience is really important to me, of why I do the line of work that I do. And so that's that's an identity for me. And so I try to, as much as possible, to do that in my line of work. So that's one of the reasons why I'm here, and a lot of that influenced what I experienced at PC. And so a lot of activism that occurred on campus really influenced my line of work. And so, yeah, I think that's why I'm here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Susie Mendl. I also graduated from PC, I should get closer, in 2017. And I was also a double major in global studies and sociology. After I graduated from PC, I went to work for a law firm briefly that was not in the immigration sector, maybe like 6 months. But I knew I wanted to get back into the immigration world after studying it extensively at Providence with Kara. And so then I started my current role at Barry Appleman and Leiden, which is a corporate immigration firm in Boston, and I've been there ever since, so like 6.5 years. In that role, I'm a paralegal, which basically just means I draft the petitions, I prepare the visas, I do all of that research and work and everything that goes into creating basically what eventually becomes someone's immigration status. I've loved it, and I also took somewhat of an unconventional route. I just graduated law school, so I'll talk a little bit about that. I went to law school the last 4 years in Boston while I also worked during the day, so it was an evening program. So I'm a great representation of that being an option to people. I went to school fully for free on scholarship, so another thing to know is out there, because I did not want any more student debt. So I did that, graduated. I just took the bar exam, so pending bar admission. I will be an attorney this year, I hope. Thank you. Thank you. But I love my job, and I'm so glad that I took the time to work as a paralegal and work in the immigration law field before I took that leap to go to law school. I always thought I wanted to be an immigration attorney ever since I took Kara's Immigration 101 class and had that kind of awakening moment where I was like, what the F? I'm not gonna swear, but you know what I mean? Like, you learn about something and you didn't understand how convoluted and twisted and unjust it was. And so after I had that experience, I could never look back. And so I knew that's what I wanted to do. And now I'm pretty much almost there, but that's another main reason that I wanted to come back. I love being able to speak on these panels and, you know, support Kara and support her students and show you guys that there are a lot of opportunities and ways to go about things. When I was at PC, I loved attending panels like this. I loved hearing about all the different ways that people work specifically in the immigration field, but also in the legal field. I loved hearing about people's experiences and kind of seeing, you know, could I do that? Do I want to take that path? But that is really why I'm here speaking with you guys. And so if anyone has any questions about alternative pathways to law school, let me know.
So what I would like to do now is to have all of you take a moment, right? If you've been in my class, I make you do this. Take a moment, and I want you to write down one question that you might have for our panelists, whether it's about careers, how to follow their path, advice they might have for you, or if you have questions more about like what it's like working with immigrant communities right now in this political landscape. Does that make sense? So take a moment, and then I would love to hear your questions, not mine. So take one moment.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for sharing your experiences. My name is Said Mendoza. I'm a professor of psychology here at PC and also an immigrant myself from Mexico. And I was curious about the work that you do as it relates to the political landscape, given that you're working from California, Boston, DC. Have you had an opportunity to engage with other folks who are interested in immigration law or immigration advocacy who don't work in socially progressive cities or states? And what is that experience like for folks who are trying to do that work? Or have you had a sense of like how much easier or more difficult it might be for someone who's interested in this work to work in a state like California, where there's a lot of direct immigration kind of conversations? I grew up in Arizona, so I'm familiar with kind of the narratives that exist on the border versus the stories that you hear when you're up here and how people perceive issues of immigration. But do you have a sense of, like, if you were to encourage or not encourage people to pursue this work? What are the unique challenges associated with doing it in a more socially progressive state versus peers of yours who might be trying to do this work in other areas of the country, if that makes sense? And if you don't have that experience working in other areas, that's totally fine too. But I'm curious, like, just do you sense that you have more resources available for you? For example, are there folks or friends of yours, peers, colleagues, who have tried doing this work in other states that they just cannot seem to really be able to get the kind of support that is needed because of political reasons, for instance?
Yeah, I can think directly to two tasks that I have in my current role. My first task that I often find trouble with is when a child is trying to reunify with a sponsor or family member that's going to receive them in the United States, and they're in a state that doesn't have free access to legal services, especially in the immigration world. It gets really tricky to try to rely on our networks of nonprofits that we know across the country to offer them those free resources. That's the first thing that comes to mind. I think it's a challenge because we want to be able to provide every child that comes through or every child that we work with a lawyer that's free or at a low cost, but it's very hard if they go to a state like Alabama and there's not enough resources out there for them. And the second thing that comes to mind is, since I work in California, the shelters that we visit are government issue, or they're under the Office of Refugee Resettlement. So it's the government that funds this. And oftentimes we get transfers from children from Texas in those centers there over to California because they don't have access to the services that they need in Texas. So they have to fly them over to California where they're able to access them.
Yeah, so I guess for me, I look at it at both, since I work, well, I used to do a lot of legal representation similar to what Christina is doing right now at the local level, but now working federally and just partnering with a lot of organizations. I see now a lot of state versus federal issues, and a lot of what we're seeing is that disconnection between state and federal funding for a lot of individuals, organizations trying to do that work. And that's interesting because even in, you can say, progressive or friendlier states, it's something that it's getting a little bit harder to get those funding, either whether it's because of cuts or something similar. So even some red tapes are involved with this. So it could be a little bit hard at times. Yes, there's some resources that are being cut, but at the same time, there's a lot of local involvement and advocacy between organizations that there are connections in wherever, I guess, locality you go to, that you will still be able to find that support, which is interesting. And that's how you get that relationship built between federal nonprofits, national nonprofits that will allow you to connect to those resources.
Wheeler. I work at Providence College, and thank you all for coming. I think it's wonderful that you've made this trip and made the time for it. I'm taking a Spanish class with Professor Pasero O'Malley, and he recommended, but I had flagged this on my Outlook mail before he said it. I was like, oh, that sounds like really interesting. So thank you for being here. And I had a specific question for, is it Vania? Vania. Vania, when in the work that you do with youth in Boston, you mentioned you have a certain sizable fund. What are the resources used for the young people? Thank you.
Great question. Tax dollars, folks wouldn't know what it's been used for. So the requirement of the program that I oversee is you have to be an immigrant youth. And the definition of the city of Boston's immigrant youth is between the ages of 14 and 24. So that means college, right, students fall within that. You have to be an immigrant, so just have the umbrella term immigrant. And again, we don't ask for status or anything like that. You have to either have attended a Boston public school or getting a GED or some type of post-secondary degree. So kind of tie back to like the education piece. And upon that, the programs provide leadership, lots of civic engagement. I mean, so I had a program, for example, one of my partners is Mass Vote. They work with a lot of youth on how to be enroll civically, right, within your community. A lot of times we think of like, oh, how do we engage, right, civics related, which is voting. But what if you are undocumented and you cannot vote, right? What are some other ways to still give back and to still be involved and to still have your voices being heard? So Mass Vote kind of like deals with a lot of that. Another partner is Pathway Initiative. They are a pipeline for high school into undergrad and medical school for underrepresented youth. So every program kind of does their own thing. However, they have to provide it changes. So for the fall right now, we're about to start a fall session. For the fall, they need to provide 5 hours of academics, so do some type of like academic component. And then there's another 5 hours of either civic engagement or anything along the lines of they go on field trips, right? They do financial literacy workshops. Right now, I go over with my team and the partners of like what is a need that you see amongst the youth. A lot of them are the same. COVID did not do us justice with our young folks. So a lot that I see is like people just not knowing how to show up to an office space or don't even know what like a work environment looks like or don't know how to talk to someone, a supervisor, just simple things as like, good morning, how are you? Like, I'm okay, I'm not okay today, right? So there's a lot of those components. But partners kind of do what they run their curriculum how they see fit. Just some of the requirements from my department is making sure that there is an academic component as well as a leadership component to it.
My question is for Jose. So I work in advancement and I worked in advancement in a nonprofit before. Can you talk about how you tell the story of people within grants without co-opting it and making it, you know, the nonprofit's story?
Okay, that's a great question. And that's something really tricky, especially in the nonprofit space that I work in. So a lot of our clients that we receive, what we provide is immigration legal work. So it can be particularly tricky in that area because there is a lot of just simply like confidential things that we are not able to share. And especially not even my department, but more specifically the direct attorney that this client might work with. There's a lot of details that are behind. When you work with an attorney, there's something called attorney-client privilege, and there's a lot of pieces of information that simply can't be shared, right? So this could be an issue that we run into when, you know, we want to provide a client story, and we want to say like, hey, like let's highlight some of the work that we're doing, but there's a lot of restrictions in what we can and cannot share. So one of the things we tried to do at my organization that I've found very helpful is that instead of just trying to work directly with the client, we work directly with the client, and whether it's the attorney or the social worker that represents them. Obviously, the attorney and social worker know the client a lot better than we do in my role, right? We don't have a direct relationship with the client like an attorney and a social worker would do. But something that allows us to do is to have someone in this space when we are trying to create a client highlight, or we are trying to, you know, give the illustration of someone's story and how they got to us, provide them with somebody in that space that they trust, that they know, and somebody that they're comfortable sharing details about. We leave it up to the line of questioning that we do when we try and highlight a story and present it to funders and donors and on grant applications. We leave the information that is shared with us, we leave it pretty vague. So you can share as little or as much as you want, as long as it falls within that line of client and worker privilege. But having that, not only the presence of the person that they're working with within our organization, but also having that person as a resource on our end, right? So we can ask this social worker and this lawyer, hey, would you feel comfortable with us putting this piece of information here or putting this aspect of their story here? And many times we get a no, but also many times we get a yes. So it's really trying to navigate that fine line between what do we want to share that, you know, not only shows the work that we're doing in an organization in a positive way, but also really highlights the client and just the uniqueness of their story. But paint it in a way where we don't paint ourselves as an organization as, you know, someone who completely, almost, you could say, like, save this client, or, you know, we also want to highlight the client in particular. And so I think that something that's really worked for us is just incorporating the worker that we have, whether it's an attorney, whether it's a social worker, whether it's a manager of one of our programs, help us out in that space, provide us with that direct connection, and also give us their feedback on some of the information that we're putting out there and sharing.
This could be a question for any of you, but just going back to like how this is an election season, and I think a lot of things regarding immigration are up in the air, and what that can mean for the immigrant as an individual. But I'm just curious, like how, like in your job, like it can be on you emotionally, especially if a lot of your identities kind of go identical to some of the immigrants, like ethnic backgrounds, social backgrounds, immigrant backgrounds. Like, how are you dealing with the emotions that come with the job that you do?
So in the mayor's office for immigrant advancement, there's different components. So there's the constituent services piece, which we provide free 15 to 20-minute legal services, which are like pro bono lawyers, right? And for folks can come in and just do like a quick consultation. We do lots of office hours at different libraries just to teach different immigrant within Boston about the services that we provide. Then there's a civic engagement piece, which we have the Immigrant Leads Boston Academy, and that is a way to try to integrate immigrant into city politics, right? Into like City Hall, so that they have a seat at the table and they have a say on the influence and policy. Then there's the organizing piece, which is kind of what I am under, and that's how do you organize folks, right? The thing you have to think about is like policies don't just land on somebody's like lap, right? Like it takes years and years and years of organizing before something could turn into a policy, before it could turn into a law. So that being said, we get a lot of constituents in the office. What we've seen more so now is for housing, right? So currently, and I'm actually gonna make this very, very clear. The immigrants that are coming, and I'm talking about particularly the Haitian immigrants that are coming, that is not a crisis, right? Boston has a housing crisis. They are not the reason for the crisis. And I need to make that very clear. So because, right, there's an influx of them coming, a lot of them come to our office to say, hey, we need a place to stay, we have families. And the thing that's tricky is housing, shelters, that is under the jurisdiction of the state and not the city. And there isn't much that we can do. We work really closely with the shelter. So some shelters, right, they kind of have you for 9 months and then you out, and then for 5 days and then you out. So oftentimes when families are getting kicked out, they call us. And so to hear those stories, I take the public transportation to go into work, and I see families sleeping at the train station. So that starts very early morning for me. And then I go into work, and then constituents are coming in. So whether that's a phone call, whether that is an email, or whether that's somebody coming in person and saying, hey, I just need something to eat, or I need a place to lay my head. It does take a toll on you. So currently my office is doing like a informed kind of way to go about the work that we're doing, because often what happens is you get a constituent, they come in, they talk to you, and then you don't even have a moment to breathe, right? Because maybe what they said was triggering to you because maybe you was once in their shoes, and then you just have to go right back into work. So how do we get away from that culture and check in with each other of like, what mood are you entering today, right? Based on the news that happened. Or a constituent just came in, or maybe yesterday the case that you had to attend to was really rough. Let me take care of that today, and that therefore you don't have to deal with it. But I am very big on like caring for oneself, and whether that's taking time off, whether that's saying like I often go work outside. I mean, it's getting a little cold now, but usually I'm like outside if I'm doing work just because I need, like, sun just does something for me. I'm an island girl. So I don't want to be in the office. I don't know if y'all have seen the City Hall building. It's not the prettiest thing. It's very much concrete, and it just feels very like closed in. So sometimes for me to get away from all of that, I just need to be doing work outside. Or sometimes I go sit at another colleague and I'm like, how are you feeling today? And having those conversations. And it doesn't get easier, right? And I think the difficult thing too with the department is, in my department, we have funding. We're actually hiring 8 positions right now. And that is just to not only show the work that Mayor Michelle Wu is doing into immigrant advancement, but also because we are recognizing the need of immigrants in Boston. There's about 180,000 immigrants in Boston, and a lot of the initiatives are very old, and we're not looking into like, what do those needs look like now? And so in getting that data, we're trying to hire so that we can expand our team. And that is just to provide as many resources, which then means a lot of the work would then be divided, right? Because 2 people versus 18 people doing a job, it's not gonna be you every day out in the field and doing the work. We do have folks that are in the shelters every day, and we know that is very taxing on them as well. But again, the more people that you have, the more support that you have, the more we're able to move around and take turns on who's gonna be doing what. But you gotta have thick skin. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, so I have, sometimes I wake up to emails where I receive emails at like 4 or 5 in the morning where they're unpublished versions of what the federal government is about to publish of a new immigration policy. It's called, and they're gonna publish it, it's something called the Federal Register, which is what the government is supposed to do, supposed to follow the law when they're gonna announce a new law or a new executive order. Mostly, not a new law, an executive order. And so an agency is going to announce this. And I sometimes hyperventilate when I know it's going to be something bad. And I get this, it's like my daily briefing. Like, you know, instead of seeing Politico, I see that. And I open up my Outlook, and that's the first thing I see. And then bad things happen, and emails of like, this is what's going to happen this day, and the policy, this new immigration policy is going to occur, and you're going to meet with this government official this time around, and this meeting is going to occur regarding unaccompanied minors, or regarding childhood arrivals who are been here for 12 or 15, 20 years. And so, or asylum seekers. And so I think for me, it has, I guess at the beginning it did take a toll because I used to do direct representation, and I would, you know, wake up to nightmares. But when I'm doing federal advocacy, or right now doing federal advocacy, there's like a point where you don't want to like get out of like that circle, because you can seem like you're a little bit far out of what's happening on the ground, and you don't want to do that because there's a lot of I guess you can say people either lobbying or working in direct advocacy in DC that don't really realize that you're there helping and working with impacted communities in immigration that do not necessarily know what's happening at the border, what's happening in other impacted communities in other states. And so, but then at the same time, you don't want that to affect you. And so what I do is I tell my spouse, oh, we should, do something or try to, go down to the city. But then I pass the White House or Congress, and that reminds me of, well, they're going to do this and that, and so they're going to pass this bill. So then that gets me more hyperventilated of like what this immigration law or something that's going to occur. So I guess trying to really ground yourself, and that's what I try to do. Of like, okay, we're here to like really try to make an impact and understand like this. You're here for a reason, and like this is why you're trying to, what they basically taught you in school and at PC, and understanding that you're here for that change.
I'll just say this, obviously, and everyone here can speak to this, working in the field of immigration emotions are high all the time. It's high stress, it's traumatic, and in an election season, it's amplified in the worst way you can imagine. You have people who don't know what their lives are going to look like in a few months, and if you can imagine how traumatizing that would be to not know if you would be here in the United States in a few months, if your family would be able to be here, if you would have your job, if your kids could continue to go to school. We have a lot of people that are on statuses that are very fragile, like TPS, DACA, even things like an H-1B, which is an employment-based visa that you might not think about, is very heavily targeted by the Trump administration. And so with the risk of a Trump presidency, that's just an ongoing fear that these people have every single day. So I would say, like, working with immigrants in an election season is traumatizing, and it's very emotional. And it's hard to see people go through this and people be in an extreme level of fear at all times.
I'll also add something real quick. So when I work with unaccompanied minors, the population I work with are children from ages 0, like newborn babies that just arrived to the U.S. or were just born in U.S. soil, up to children that age out when they're 18. And I do legal screenings with them, which means I ask them a series of questions to talk about their journey, to talk about how Border Patrol treated them, to talk about maybe how they were separated from a family member, to talk about the reasons why they fled from their country. And there are very frightening things that are shared with me under the current administration, and with the upcoming election arising, we can only imagine what else is gonna happen. My organization, along with other nonprofits in the country, we've heard about Border Patrol abuse. They are not allowed to handcuff minors, and I've had multiple minors tell me that they have been handcuffed. I have been told by multiple minors that they have been cursed at, they have been threatened by Border Patrol agents, and it's gonna continue to be amplified. So I appreciate you asking the question about self-care, because some of these days after the shelter, I just wanna go home and cry. Luckily, I'm able to work from home after the shelter visits, but it does get very heavy. I come from, my parents are here, they're both immigrants, and it's just very hard to hear these stories and their children. We're hearing from 5-year-olds to 17-year-olds to newborn babies. And so I think one of the biggest things that I say if you're thinking about getting into this work is to know that there are organizations and there are people on the ground, people on the policy level, and we are doing everything that we can in our power to help. And so I think that just self-care is super important. Know what your limits are. If you work with a team, rely on the team. Sometimes I look at the list of the children that I need to meet with on a one day, and if I have 3 back-to-back heavy intakes, I'm gonna be, hey, can you help me out because I just need a break, and just know your limits.
Yeah, similar to what Christina just said, I used to do legal intakes as well, and one of the really challenging things is when you're screening somebody, you ask them specific questions just so that you, as the person that's screening them, kind of understands a little bit more about what their particular case might be or in what direction you might want to guide it. And again, some people share very little, but some people really do share a lot. A lot of the times when you're doing these screenings, you're one of the only few people that they're really opening up to about what they've gone through, because they're holding on to that hope that you or your organization or somebody within there might be able to help them. So sometimes, by providing all this information, they can feel like, like this is where I might get this help. And like Christina said, it can be really challenging because you do this screening, you submit your paperwork, and then you're right back to another client, or you get another phone call of another client, and it's a whole different story. In my case, you would sometimes hear about a lot of the clients that I worked with were people that would kind of recall their journey of the journey that they made from their home countries to the U.S. So I would get a lot of details to that. But there were other cases where it was clients that had suffered some sort of abuse here in the U.S. and you would hear about what's happening within your own communities. I mean, clients that live within the city of Boston, that take the same subway line that I do, that live just a few miles from my house, and you're hearing about some of these stories, and then you have to go right back into the work. So that can be a little bit challenging. I think that everybody here has touched about self-care and some of the things that our organizations do. Within my organization, I've been really lucky to have staff that is very aware to the effects of burnout and trauma and that it can have on you, especially within our legal services team. So, understanding that you have that support, but also recognizing that, when you do come into this line of work, it is something that you're going to have to face, is having to hold on to a lot of things that a lot of people in other professions don't have to carry with them. So it is something that it's important to recognize, but it's also, I think it's a good example to see that there are ways in which you can regulate, whether it's individually or as a team with your colleagues and others around you.
Hi, my name is Chris. I'm a junior here. My question is for Susan specifically. Could you just dive into a little bit more about the paralegal process that you went through as an alternative to law school?
Yeah. So I wanted to be an immigration paralegal. That when I graduated PC, I thought that was what made the most sense for me because I knew I wanted to be an attorney, but I wasn't ready to take the leap to law school. I felt like I needed to experience the field first before I made that decision. And my only exposure to the legal immigration world was internships I had done at Dorcas. And that can be very heavy, very intense, that they're dealing with a lot of really traumatic stuff. And so when I graduated school, I was thinking I would go do something like that. But the other problem is I'm not bilingual, and that's a huge disadvantage if you want to work in nonprofits, generally speaking, because they need people who are bilingual. So that's kind of how I ended up in corporate immigration. It was kind of like a stumbling type situation. It worked for me because I didn't need to be bilingual. And so that's how I found the job. I ended up loving it. For me, I found that it is the best of both worlds. We do employment-based cases as well as family-based cases, and we also partner with kids in need of defense, so we also get to do some of the more nitty-gritty things that make this field, that why you're drawn to this field. You really want to help people and you want to see a major impact. But working as a paralegal there for 6.5 years, I basically just got to know the whole process. You learn about all the visa types, you see a lot of different people go through a lot of different experiences and track kind of their path to citizenship and beyond, because usually that's the goal, get citizenship. And then during that time and working with immigration attorneys, that's how I decided okay, yeah, I see what they do, I want to do that. I love what I'm doing currently, which is how I made the decision to stay and then go to law school at night. Because originally I thought I would go to law school during the day and leave my job, but I loved my job so much that I didn't want to do that. So I stayed, did law school at night. My firm was very supportive of it. I think a lot of firms are supportive of their paralegals going to law school and pursuing a future at that firm. And so that's what I did. And so, yeah, and then I graduated law school. I'll soon be an attorney for them. And that was just kind of the path I took that made the most sense for me. And I guess just to summarize, I just wanted to see if that was really what I wanted to do, which is why I started as a paralegal for a few years before applying to law school and then doing law school.
I'm Allison Kaplan, and I'm in the Spanish department, or World Languages and Cultures here. And I just want to say that what you're doing is so impressive and just wonderful. And I'm looking around the room, and I think that maybe you could speak to this. Susie, you kind of mentioned it. Like, how can you get started if you're not, I mean, I'm from San Diego, like Pedro, and you know, you grow up in that community and you're very aware of these issues just because it's all around you. But I'm thinking that a lot of students at PC don't have that direct contact with immigrant communities and all of that. And I'm just wondering if you could give, I mean, I know Dorcas is an opportunity, but as all of you were saying, there's a lot of money out there. There's a lot of organizations that you just don't know exist unless you're looking for them, and they'd love to have volunteers, and that can turn, I mean, I think that if you're interested in this, and you don't know much about it, I think it's great to take the courses, but it's also really great to just volunteer and help. I mean, you're talking about young people who are, you know, who may need some tutoring or something. And that, I think, will tell you, you know, if you really love that work, it's a good first step. And there's so many opportunities, I think, and maybe you can speak to them. I don't know all of them in Rhode Island. I think there are probably more in Boston and that kind of thing. But even that's possible to do one day a week or something. And I think that's the way to get your feet wet and say, do I really like this work? Especially if you're not from a community where there are these issues all around you. But anyway, I think it's some of the most important work that can be done really in this country. I guess it's more of a comment, but question. I mean, like, where else besides Dorcas and Providence?
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and it's great to see you, Dr. Kaplan. It's funny that you say that because we at my organization, we do a lot of internships, and because we are a network of organizations, we have connections with a lot of Catholic charities or a lot of nonprofits. We actually, we have one affiliate in Rhode Island, which is Sojourner House, and so we would probably be able to connect individuals who are interested in immigration or in any type of field. But then we also, my team, we have an internship or people who are interested in interning for our own organization. I know recently our advocacy team, we had an intern for the summer. He was a law student, but we don't just have an internship for law students. So, and we actually are the ones who hire them, but hire an intern, but like, it's obviously internship, so it's not paid. We're trying to, but as of right now, it's not. But yeah, so we try to do that, and unfortunately, I couldn't, do the hiring process this year because just timing, and it was an election year, so I was extremely busy. But one of my state and local advocacy colleague, she had an intern, so she worked with an intern. So yeah, probably next year I'll be looking for one. So yeah, if people are interested, and that's a great connection because it's in DC, and it's remote. So if people are interested, yeah, let me know.
Talk about a little bit. So when I first graduated from PC, I actually did an AmeriCorps summer program, and I spent that summer at a nonprofit based in Dallas, in the Dallas area. And I think this is just like a good resource to have if you want to find different nonprofits, and especially in the nonprofit world, there are a lot of different organizations that do a lot of different work, but if specifically you're interested in immigration stuff, and I remember this off the top of my head, and we actually used to tell this to our interns or vistas like myself, that if there is a particular organization that you want to find in a certain area, it was a simple website called findhelp.org, and it's kind of like a Google for services, right? So you insert whatever you are looking for, and then in whatever area you're looking for. So we can use Providence as an example. You insert Providence, Rhode Island, and since the case or the topic tonight is immigration, just type in immigration, and it'll give you a list of organizations, of different activities you might be able to volunteer in. It'll give you their website, their contact information. So if you want to learn about different organizations that are doing, and it just does not have to just be immigration work. It can be healthcare. It can be legal services. It can be pro bono legal services, education. It can be a lot of different things. You can use this as a resource just to find organizations that are doing the work in your community. And that can go a long way because then you have the contact information, you can reach out to them, you can see their volunteer opportunities. And I think that goes a long way into finding out what opportunities are available, whether it's in your area or somewhere else you want to explore in the country. And that was findhelp.org if you guys are ever interested in checking that out.
I was just going to say, too, I don't have the mic, but if you're interested in some of those things that you mentioned, the Feinstein Institute is also a really good institute to go seek out because they have established community partnerships, and they're establishing new ones with the immigration partnerships. That's not just Dorcas. I'm just going to say that. Go ahead.
My name is Tony Pacero. I teach Spanish here at PC. Thank you so much for being here and for sharing your experience. And I also, before my question, I just wanted to say, Christina, what a testament that your parents are able to be here today. It's a pleasure, and it's an honor, so thank you. I think the burning question that I have with the topic of your panel is, what is the role that languages, second languages, play in your day-to-day? Thinking of your engagement with Spanish, with French, with Creole, what's that like on a day-to-day? What's the importance of it? And what's that like? And thinking, Christina, with your work with youth.
Thank you for asking that question, because this immediately brings me back to my day on Tuesday. Tuesday was actually a very great day at the shelter for me. I was gonna visit a child that was one of the first children I met in the detention center. He is from Mauritania, which is a country below Morocco in the Western Sahara, and they speak two very distinct languages. One's called Tigrinya, and then the other one starts with an A, I can't remember. And we have to schedule an interpreter in advance for them. And unfortunately, the detention center didn't communicate with us what time he'd be done with the medical appointment, and I was just sitting on the line with the interpreter, and it was really awkward because his camera was on and the child wasn't there. And so I had to hang up because we were being charged by the minute, and I was 40 minutes online. So then I went home, and then I get a call back from the detention center saying, oh, he's available now. I quickly drive back to the center, and I couldn't get an interpreter. And he's been in government care for over 140 days. He's been able to pick up some English, and I was gonna give him the good news that we were gonna be able to offer him one of our lawyers from our organization. And I was like, I really wanna be able to do this in your language, but I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get an interpreter. And so I was like, I'm gonna have one loading just in case we're able to get it. I'm gonna best explain this in the most basic English I can. And if you have any follow-up questions, if we're unable to get an interpreter today, we'll follow up next week. Miraculously, I was able to find an interpreter, and he just had tears of joy. It was just like, you could see the sigh of relief that he had. And for me, I told him, I was like, this is truly a full circle moment. I'm very lucky that I was able to have you as one of the first children I met in this center, and to be able to be one of the last people that because he's aging out next week. So he's gonna be placed into probably a long-term foster care home. And he has no sponsor in the United States. But to be able to actually offer him a resource, an attorney that's going to be able to help him, was just, and to be able to do it in his language too, was just a huge sigh of relief for me. So we had a moment, and he kept touching his heart, and I kept touching my heart. But I think languages play such a huge role. Luckily, I'm able to speak Spanish. I dabble in French, so sometimes I joke around with minors that speak French and Creole. And you could just see like the smile on their face to hear someone speak their language and be like, I immediately have a connection with this person, and I'm able to trust them. And it just makes the entire difference in the world for someone that's in this country without their parents, in a center where they feel they're stuck and locked up. So yeah, that was a really happy moment for me on Tuesday, just to be able to offer good news in his native tongue.
Great question. So in the city, you have to translate all of your work into like probably all of the languages. So in my program that I oversee, it is translated in 8 different languages that are commonly used by the office. Our office is also very diverse, where we speak Cape Verdean Creole, which is what I speak, also speak Spanish, took Spanish at PC, took French at PC. I could get by with French. And then Somali, Vietnamese, Haitian Creole, and I think that is about it. However, we don't know, like other folks that we're hiring could be speaking other languages as well. We do have a language access department in the city, and they provide translation and interpretation. So if a constituent was to come in, there's literally like a pamphlet on the table, and the first thing we pick it up and we're like, point to the language that you speak and then they will either point, and then if it's somebody that speaks that language, we attend the constituent. If not, we then go ahead and hop on the line, click our designated numbers for an interpreter. But yeah, everything in the city needs to be translated. So I'm one of those people that if I'm looking for resources, or someone is like, hey, Vania, you should send this to your youth, I'm like, is it translated in 8 different languages? If not, go get that done, send it back to me, and then I'll send it to my youth. Because I think that's it's very important, right? Because we miss a lot of data and a lot of information when there's a language barrier. So yeah.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll go really quick. When I was doing direct representation, I didn't realize how everything is so connected, even from the small detail up until the federal government. I was doing my master's thesis at the border, and I needed to connect with the community there, and they were from Haiti, in Tijuana, and they were in Tijuana, and I only spoke Spanish, and they spoke Haitian Creole, but at the time, they also were speaking Portuguese, because they learned Portuguese when they were in Brazil. And so when there was a quote-unquote program that the Trump administration created called Migrant Protection Protocols, in reality it's called Remain in Mexico, so they were excluded from entering the United States in 2018. And so when that occurred, I took it upon myself to learn Portuguese because I decided to learn and be able to communicate with them. And so when that occurred, I was, that conversation daily. I took it, I think, for a year, those classes. And for me, learning from that, after started doing legal representation, I ended up taking those cases in Portuguese. I was the only one in my organization now that I was able to speak Portuguese without me really it just occurred. And so I was going to detention centers because people were being placed in that environment. And so afterwards, now taking that experience and then into the federal government, or I guess in the federal government space, bringing that into meeting with those government officials, and the education department actually just sent a letter to the UCIS Office of Policy person, and the Department of Education, citizenship, they have a long title, but it's a citizen educator who's in charge of creating policies to better enhance language acquisition. And something that we really tried to aspire was that they're trying to change the citizenship test. And a lot of that changes were trying to exclude a lot of language access. And so we tried to let them know that if you're trying to do that, you're gonna exclude a lot of people whose primary language is not from the Roman alphabet, and a lot of people who don't really have digital access. And so really learning that if it was hard for me to learn a Roman language, let alone a lot of individuals who do not have access to education in a social setting, in a state where the funding is not accessible, in a red state or purple state. Just imagine how hard it is for other individuals. And so, but yeah.
Okay, it is. My name's Clyde. This question might be a little bit off topic, but for Vania, you mentioned in your introduction that Providence College overall wasn't an inclusive place, or a place that was built for people that looked like you. I guess just what specific scenarios or examples brought you to that conclusion?
We're gonna be here all day. Where do I even start? So and I'm not here to give you a history about PC, but PC was originally all men's college, right? Dean Ingram is still around? So Dean Ingram, who retired, was a part of the first class of women. So automatically, the institution was not set up for a person like me, right, a female. And then one of the things that I never shared while I was in Providence, due to not so much fear, but due to protection of myself and my family, is I was undocumented when I was at PC. No one knew. I was actually told not to share my status to protect myself. So trying to navigate an institution that is predominantly white, Catholic, right? Catholicism, that's a whole different ballpark. And when we look at who sits in cabinet, I don't know if you do that type of research. I was that student. I knew everybody who sit in cabinet, where they came from, what their background was. That was just me. I needed to know who was running the institution that I was at, right? And then felt like I was a quota here. And then I'm low income, coming from a mixed status family, multilingual. It goes on and on and on, and identify as queer. PC was never meant to be a space for somebody like myself. I came to Providence College because I was awarded a full academic scholarship. Providence College was not a choice for me. I couldn't get into the school that I wanted because of the lack of my status. So I took advantage of the scholarship that I was given, had to maintain a 3.3. So try to be a college student and have fun, right? Go Friars, while studying, while sitting in all your identities in a campus that you look around and nobody looks like you. Or they don't share the same experiences as you. And on top of that, you kind of have to not talk about it. So there's a lot that stays inside. But I made it through, because I always do. That's how I was raised. So that is what I mean when I say that Providence College is not meant for a space. And I still could make a whole argument. I could write you a paper, a dissertation as to why Providence College, it is not structured to be a space for folks like myself, a woman of color, an immigrant, undocumented, low income. Forget if you're not Catholic, right? So there's all those added layers. And for me, it was, so Susie and Pedro graduated the same year. I think for some folks that was here, if you go and say, hey, what do you think about Vania? They would probably be like, ugh. I gave PC a run for their money. I sure did. And I challenge other students that are currently here to do so. I challenge those that sit in position of power, such as being a man, such as being white, such as being a US citizen, to stand in solidarity with those that don't come from a position of power and say, how can we make this campus an inclusive campus for everybody? And often what I found was, and interesting enough, no one assumed that I was undocumented while I was at PC. People assumed Andrea was because she's from Guatemala. People assumed Pedro was because he was from Mexico. And we have our other friend who was from Dominican Republic. No one assumed that I was undocumented. And so I say that to say, you could have a roommate that you love dearly and you're like, yo, that's homie, and you don't even know what they're going through. And yet you can have this whole rhetoric of, let's say in the case of immigration, right? You could be like, I love my roommate, he's so nice, he's so good, he saved me food, he tucks me in at night, whatever the case is, and then all the while saying shitty stuff about immigrants, and he could be an undocumented immigrant that you're talking about. That happens on this campus. It happens in almost all campuses. And I saw that, and I heard, and it was people that I was close to that things came out of their mouths, and I'm like, geez. And it wasn't until they put a face to a name to a face, for them to be like, oh, wait a minute, I don't think about that about you. I think about the others. Maybe you're more deserving than the others. And then I have to be like, no, 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 it doesn't work like that. So Providence College, I graduated, 7 years ago? It still has a lot of work to do. It is nowhere near where it needs to be. When I graduated, PC turned 100 years old, right? And yeah, I'm just gonna leave it at that. It's a great institution. I learned a lot academically. I met great professors. I made great friends. After PC, I went on to Brown to get my master's. Like, it set me up in a great trajectory, and that is what I'm grateful for. But if I wasn't, I'm very outgoing, I'm very outspoken. If you are not, you will struggle tremendously on this campus. And all my folks of color left, so I don't know how these kids are doing it.
Can I add something? Sorry.
Sure.
Yeah, I was just to add something. I find this like a deja vu type of moment because we were here like 7 years ago in 2016 because it was an election season. And so we were attending panels and all of a sudden things changed in November. And there's a reason why I also didn't come out as queer in college, you know, in a moment where you're supposed to explore your identities and make sure that, you know, you feel safe. And that's something that I myself didn't. And I was born here. I was born in San Diego, and people were confusing me and thinking that I myself was an immigrant. And even though I recognize my privilege as being born in the United States, people still assume that I was, you know, an immigrant myself. And so, or people would confuse me as someone who was not supposed to be living at a dorm. And so I think that's, you know, an issue there. So that got me into that student activism and getting involved to really reflect on the work that I do now. So that's the experience of being a student of color at PC with the line of work that we end up in. So yeah.
Oh my God, that was visceral for me, hearing all of that. But I know today's panel, like, we're focusing kind of on the federal election, on the presidential election. But as someone who works or volunteers on a lot of local and statewide elections, I'd love to hear if through your work you see the impacts of these elections, these state and local elections, on immigrant communities. Like, some things that come to mind just as some examples are DeSantis's like horrible no water, no breaks, no shade policies in Florida that impact farm workers. But then here in Rhode Island, you know, governor after governor refused to take action on driver's licenses for many years. And then it took flipping some conservative seats in the General Assembly to be able to get to a point where the General Assembly could pass driver's licenses for all Rhode Island residents. And even then went further, and the General Assembly passed and expanded on Medicaid to cover all children, regardless of legal status. So healthcare is super important, obviously. So if you have any experience, whether through your work or personally, with local elections and the impact that they have on immigrant communities, whether it's healthcare related, education. I know the student who introduced the panel at the beginning talked about her town versus the other town, and a lot of those things have to do with who's in office and in power locally. So if you could share on any of that, that would be great.
I can start and speak to that. So when I first moved to Boston in the summer of 2022, it was an election year there. And so I moved to Boston without knowing a lot of the local issues that immigrant communities face in Boston. And so a lot of that summer was just kind of taking that stuff in, absorbing it, and learning about it. But since it was an election year, there was a lot of work to do. And the kind of program that I was managing at the time, we were part of an organization that was very much focused, or it still is very much focused, on advocacy work. And one of the member organizations that we worked with, they were very involved in passing an initiative on the Massachusetts state ballot. It was called the Yes on 4 campaign, which actually brings up a point that you brought up, Andrea, which is pretty much driver's license for undocumented immigrants and having them have access to driver's license. And so I had actually never done phone canvassing in my life, but we were asked as staff to do so. And it was really unique because the phone canvass, in my experience, what I had was it really much is kind of just a casual conversation, speaking to someone about an issue that you want them to understand on why you think they should vote a certain way on a particular issue. And speaking to people, right off the bat, you might hear certain things that are like, well, I don't want undocumented immigrants to have a license because of this. And what that highlights is a general lack of understanding of migrants and what they bring to communities and the positives that they can bring to communities. And when you can have a conversation with somebody, and I found this really unique, and it gave me a little bit of hope that hopefully things can improve, but when you're able to have a conversation with someone, not in an aggressive way where they don't get defensive, and you're able to actually point out benefits as to why a certain initiative should go a certain way and how that would not just help the person that initiative is kind of based around, but also communities as a whole and the state of Massachusetts as a whole. It was a really wonderful thing to kind of listen to people, maybe not directly change their opinions, but at least consider yours, and having a space where you're able to kind of allow certain ideas that they might have not considered or heard in their own circles, and you were able to give a voice to those ideas. So I found that a really enjoyable part of some of the work that we as a team and as an organization did in support of other organizations that we worked with. So that was a little bit of my experience, but I really found that very, very helpful and fulfilling in learning about that.
Just really quickly, so obviously I'm in the city, and I'm very big on, right? So first things first, if you are a US citizen, you're able and capable of voting, please do so. I don't care who you vote for. Exercise your right. That is your right, and I feel like we don't teach our youth that enough. That being said, there's a huge focus on the presidential election that we forget city, state, right? And that is very important. We were just having this conversation with Kara earlier, where I even have this conversation within my own Cape Verdean community back in Boston, because it's like, what am I voting for? My vote doesn't matter. It's your right. Exercise it. And then your vote starts to not matter when you want to go vote for a president. You don't even know who your mayor is. And you don't even know who your governor is, right? And I think that's very important, because when you look at who's occupying the House, who's occupying Senate, and then, right, like Congress and all of that, it makes a difference. Imagine if the party in which you vote for had House, had Senate, and everything else. That looks great for you. And a lot of times, policies haven't been able to get passed down, and I'll just use an example of like the DREAM Act, for example, right, where it might pass House because it, predominantly Democrats, and then it gets stopped in Senate because it's predominantly Republicans. So those, city is very, 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 it's as important as the presidential elections for one to vote. And then I know it's every 2 years, but there's the mayor, you can vote, there's a senator, there's a rep, do you even know who the rep for where you live is? There's city council. I see city council in City Hall all the time, and those people actually are out in the community, listening to the community and representing their community when there's these big meetings, or even for budgets, right? It's like, okay, we have a $5 billion budget and it's going to X, Y, and Z. You can go, and it's actually public, so all the budget meetings in City Hall is public, and you can go and you can sit in and you can have an input of wait a minute, maybe we need more money to go to housing, maybe we need more money to go to childcare, maybe we need more money to go to schools. These are all things that you can exercise, and I would say within the city level, you don't even need to be a US citizen to do that, right? There's ways that you can get involved and change and shake up communities and policies without even being a US citizen. And I think that very much starts at the city level.
A quick, sorry, it's coming in now. We have 5 minutes here. So one of the things that so thank you to all of our panelists, and I want to end just on one last question, sort of wrap up, so if we can do this fast so that we make sure that we get people out of here on time. But one of the things I think, Caroline, that we talked about at the end is, you just gave lots of great advice about going to vote, and the reasons that they need to vote. But do you have other advice for them? I mean, Allison Kaplan brought up, like, go get involved now while you're a student. Do you have other pieces of advice for the students who are still left, or for your faculty, about things that we should be doing, or as we help our students figure out where they're going next in life? Or do you have advice for the students themselves about what they should be doing as they enter into their sophomore, junior, senior years, and then out the door?
I'll start. I'll just say, for me, I think the biggest piece of advice is like reach out to us, to other people that went to PC and graduated that might have a connection somehow to something you're interested in or something you might want to do. I never, while I was at PC, like reached out to anybody because I was kind of nervous to do it. But so many people have reached out to me since I started speaking on panels and being like, reach out, reach out. And I think it helps. It helps you to talk through it with someone one-on-one, like possible options, what you might want to get involved in, how you can get involved in these things. So honestly, yeah, use your alumni. I think we're a good resource.
I'll go. I guess just echoing what Susie said, reach out, as we mentioned, we're here. And I think also making sure to keep in contact with your community back home. And it's also important to, whatever happens in November, and just speaking about election because we are talking about the event, is that whatever happens, everything's going to be okay with you, and making sure that you have the necessary resources, because I think we all went through it, and like here at PC, and we understand that it will be a big impact, a lot of people's lives, and understanding that we graduated that same year, and so that built a lot of well, not same year of the election, but the following year, and the start of the new administration. So it really created a wave push of advocacy, and so I would say making sure to prepare, but at the same time build that momentum with your loved ones, but at the same time that you're always connecting with your faculty and your alumni, and yeah.
I will say, I was asking earlier, like, what does PC students look like in 2004, like 20, I was about to say 2004, whoa, in 2024? And one of the things I guess that was picked up was like, PC students of color are not finding or forming their community until junior year, which is like really late. So my advice, and this goes to all, find your community and whatever that is, right? If it's an immigrant group, if it's somebody, you want to talk, like I have a tattoo, it says the Fab Four. I got it when I was in college for my 21st birthday. Like that's my gang, that's my group, right? Like that's my community. Find your community when you first start. And then once you find your community, my second thing is be involved on campus. It is your campus as much as it is anybody else's campus. I was like, obviously go to class and do your classwork. That's why we're here, right? But be involved in what that looks like is Board of BMSA, right? Like Board of Multicultural Student Affairs, BMSA, play a sport, something, I don't care. Because when you're involved, you will then find your community. And like, Pedro just got married in May. I was there, right? Like he was my community when I first came because of the places, like whether it was programs like these or things like that. So like find your community, because then it is that community that will end up supporting you in your trajectory, whatever that is.
Yeah, I think everybody on the panel has made a great point thus far. For my piece of advice would be just don't be afraid to try. So that's really broad, but I think it's broad on purpose. So whether it's you want to talk to an alum or somebody that has taken a career path that you want to take, don't be afraid to reach out and email them. You want to be a little bit more active within your communities, whether that's here at PC or back at home. Don't be afraid to look for resources to be involved. If you want to take the steps to find your community, like Vania said, don't be afraid to join a new club, to join a new sport, to take that class that a lot of other people might not be taking. And then if you're in a career path, don't be afraid to make a mistake. I can talk about my own personal experience. I went into finance and I didn't like it, but I don't necessarily view that as a mistake. Rather, it was just an opportunity of me determining something that I didn't want to do and me being able to narrow down things that I did want to do. So don't be afraid to just go out and try things. Some things you're going to like, some things you're not going to like. But within trying different things and trying different communities and different groups, you're going to find a space that you feel like you belong to and that really takes you in as well. So that's my 2 cents there.
And then, like everyone said, connect with us. You can always connect with us on LinkedIn if you ever have any questions, if you ever, just anything at all. I mean, I talked to Pedro like 2 years ago, and I'm like, how do I get into this kind of work? And I probably talked to him maybe once before that, and Kara was like, talk to Pedro, and also talk to Kara, talk to your professors. They know who to reach out to, and so we're always going to be more than willing to talk to you, all of you. And then in terms of what to do at PC, I was so introverted my freshman year. I was so shy in Kara's class. I was always so scared to like ask a question. I would whisper to my friend. I would whisper to Sean and be like, what does that mean? And Kara would be like, raise your hand, ask the question. So don't be afraid to ask questions. If you see something is missing or like you're like, why aren't there enough resources for this? Step up, say something, ask a professor to help you out. If you want to revamp a club, do it. If you want to be more involved in something, do it. Like it's crazy how much you can do on this campus, and yes, it's overwhelming with all your coursework and friends and going out and stuff like that, but you can actually do so much. And I'm always talking about my PC days, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did this with PERC, with the Providence Immigrant Rights Coalition, and oh my gosh, and now I'm kind of applying that to my job now. So it's limitless. Like, you can do a lot here, and so don't just limit yourself just to things that you think is right in front of you. Just keep searching for more.
And sorry, can I say something? I also want to say, I guess, thank you and for the faculty and professors, because we know, like students, we know who are the faculty who are always with us or in our journey at PC. And for a lot of us, or who are students of color or queer, or who might not, quote unquote, be the typical student at PC, for a lot of us that means that we need faculty support and or the department support, and for me, I had the privilege of having really good professors and departments. So, and it was the nature of my studies, and I can see like a lot of those professors are here, and so for me, I had that great opportunity, and I know plenty of I know students also might have that as well. so yeah, I think that's also something that we probably are grateful for. So yeah, thank you.
Round of applause.